Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Eustis City Hall. This is a workshop of the Eustis City Commission. It's 5 o'clock. It's Thursday, May 6, 2021. Mary, is there a quorum present? Proper notice been given?
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you so much. This workshop is an overview of the fiscal year 2021-22 budget and review of the capital improvement plan. Mr. Nyberg.
My apologies. The capital improvement plan is still undergoing final review. We will do that at a future meeting.
Thank you, sir.
However, based on the commission's desire, and that we have two commissioners who haven't had this pleasure before, I did that for Mike Shepard's benefit, the word pleasure. We thought we'd give you an overview of basically the structure of the city of Eustis's budget. That way, as we go through the process, through the balance of the year, you can understand when we use the word fund, when we talk about enterprise funds, when we talk about revenue streams, fund transfers, and that, you can kind of have an understanding of what Mike's trying to say, and the other department heads. So, to start off, basically the financial structure we talk about the word fund, and a fund is a fiscal and accounting entity in a self-balancing set of accounts and recording cash. Basically what it is, rather than reading the thing in there, a fund is a set of monies set aside for a specific purpose in governmental funding. And you'll hear enterprise funds, general fund, operational funds, special purpose funds. You'll hear those bandied about throughout the evening in the course of that. So a fund is a pool of money utilized for specific specified purposes. What kind of funds do we have in the city? We have governmental type funds, and the city's governmental funds consist of our general fund, special revenue funds, and capital project funds. The general fund is the general operating fund of the city. It's used to account for all financial resources except those required to be accounted for in another fund. Resources include taxes, franchise fees, state and local shared revenues, grant fees, fines, forfeitures, charges for services, and other miscellaneous revenues. Services provided through the use of these revenue sources in the general fund include general government, public safety, physical environment, and transportation and cultural and recreation. The general fund supports the vast majority of the operations of the city, basically police, fire, these offices here, parks and recreation, Public Works. A good portion of the Public Works Department is covered by the general fund, and it is the most important fund of the city. Now, some of the folks in here, like Rick, will say, no, the water and sewer fund is, but I don't think anyone has their own little fund in here. So the general fund is the one that's most important. Unfortunately, the general fund is the one that we have the least control over. The general fund is governed by property ad valorem property taxes. And of course, obviously, while we control the millage rate, the tax assessor and the economy control what the values of those properties are. Also, sales taxes are part of that, and I'll get into that later in terms of what makes up those funds. But the general fund is the most important, and unfortunately, the one that we have least control over in terms of revenues. Special revenue funds. Various special revenue funds are appropriated to specific revenue sources that are legally and administratively restricted to the expenditures for specified purposes. The following are the major special revenue funds for the city. Street Improvement Fund is a separate fund that we have where we receive revenues that comes from the county gas tax and can only be used for street improvements. Community Redevelopment Trust Fund, that's our CRA fund. We get the money through the incremental increase in property taxes for properties located within the CRA and can be used only within the CRA for specific approved CRA expenditures. Building Services Fund are all the monies we receive for building permits, and by statute those are restricted only for the use of enforcement and implementation of the Florida Building Code. So it's a restricted use fund for what we can use it for. Stormwater Utility Fund, that's that little fee you get on your water bill every month, and those all of our customers in the city receive the stormwater bill as part of their weekly, monthly charges for their water and sewer, and can only be used for stormwater utility projects. Capital projects funds are funds that we use for capital expenditures over $25,000, and typically comes from the 1 cent sales tax that we receive from the county through the tax that was approved by referendum and reauthorized by referendum a few years back. Proprietary funds are funds, sometimes you hear the phrase and term enterprise funds, and these are funds that are based on specific operations. I like to call them sometimes our business funds, because we're providing a service and we're charging them a user fee for it. These are not taxes that collect those funds. These are primarily funds that are utilized to provide these services. Water and Sewer Revenue Fund is our water and sewer fund, and it's primarily funded by the revenues related to the operation and sales and services provided by the Water and Sewer Department. Reclaim Water Fund, in similar, we produce reclaimed water from our sewer plant. We send it out into the world to those that have reclaimed water services, and they pay us for that service. Water and Sewer Renewal and Replacement Fund. Basically what we do is when we set up capital projects for the upcoming year in water and sewer, we set aside those revenues inside that special operations fund. So it's kind of like a capital projects fund for water and sewer projects. So we're going to have a $7 million sewer plant expansion. What we will do is we will take those revenues earmarked for that project, place it in that fund, and manage the accounting and operations of that project inside that separate fund. Any questions at this point? Revenues, AKA, where does the money come from? So now that you know the types of funds that we have and where they come from, where does the money come from to fund those? Well, general fund, as we said earlier, comes from our ad valorem taxes. We have franchise fees that we charge to our customers for the electric and gas services that are provided in the city. We have utility fees or taxes, utility taxes that we charge for electric, gas, and water and sewer. Those are all collected from our customers, and I think the total is 10% for between the two of them.
The franchise fees are based on which franchise we get them. Usually those are going to be about 6 to 7%. And the utility taxes are always
10%. So we receive those funds, they can go into the general fund. Licenses and permits, so all of those other non-building permit related licenses and permits that we sell, funds go in there. Also, we have intergovernmental revenues that come from grants, shared revenues, the half-cent sales tax allocation that we get from the state through sales tax, and interfund transfers, and these are important ones that we talk about from time to time. Interfund transfers to the general fund are based on what's called an indirect cost study. So every year or so, we analyze the amount of work that general fund employees do that are related to those special or enterprise funds or special proprietary funds. So X amount of my time goes towards operations and maintenance of the water and sewer fund. So we can allocate a portion of water and sewer revenues to be transferred into the general fund to support those general fund operations. So we do that from time to time. We're going to be doing a reanalysis of that this year to see if we could transfer additional funds from water and sewer fund into the general fund to help support those general fund operations. We do the same with the CRA. A portion of Tom's time, while he's paid out of the general fund, a portion of his time is used to administer and operate the CRA program. Therefore, we're allowed by indirect cost analysis to transfer funds from the CRA to the general fund to cover Tom's time for those efforts. Similar to the building fund, some of the building fund, given Lori's staff and some of her general fund staff do the same, we're allowed to transfer those funds into the general fund to cover those costs. Special revenue funds, street improvement funds, as I said earlier, comes from motor fuel taxes. The CRA funds comes from the incremental taxes from property based on the increase in value. Building services fund are the permit fees, licenses and permits. Stormwater and utility revenue funds come from the monthly user fees. Proprietary funds, obviously the user fees that we charge, be it for your monthly bill or buying special services such as renting a meter, or other services that we may provide. Reclaimed water is user fees, and obviously, as I said earlier, the water and sewer renewal and replacement are the interfund transfers from the revenue fund into there for the management and operations of those projects as they come along. Now, what's the real money? To kind of show you how they fund work, kind of give you a broad-based view of what we have. Now here, on the general fund side, you can see all the funds that go down the line. We have the general fund, and we start going down and then to the right. Right now, we have a beginning fund balance of about $7.8 million. Annual revenues are about $18 million. Expenditures this year are proposed to be about $17.8 million. Out of that fund balance and our budgetary rules and regulations, we're required to maintain a reserve about $4.1 million, which gives us an available fund balance of $3.8 million. So if you notice, based on these updated numbers, that the revenues of $18.0 million less the $17.8 million gives us a little less than $200,000 in budget surplus in the general fund in a year. So less than 1%, it's a pretty tight margin in terms of a surplus on an operating budget. So we're keeping the budget very tight, we're keeping it very close. Library contribution fund is a small fund, $88,000. Sales tax revenues coming in, that's the 1% sales tax, so we have fund 1.8 million. We get about 1.6 million a year, we're budgeting about 1.5, and we have a fund balance right now of about 1.9. Law enforcement, education, police forfeiture, are small funds that are specialized use funds that we get from seizures and for special programmatic funds. Street improvement fund is one of our tighter budgets, so we have about 1.7 million in revenue. We're spending about 1.7 million a year in street improvements, so if the money comes in, we're not letting it gather moss in the bank. We're putting out there to work to make street improvements. Community redevelopment, CRA, we've got about 1.3 million a year that comes in on that. What happened to the fund balance on that? We have no fund balance because we have all of it in our reserves right now. Building services fund is pretty healthy. We get about $400,000 a year in revenues. We're spending about $700,000. I think a lot of that is some capital cost on equipment that Lori's using for the building department, so that's why we're spending more than typically what we take in, but we still have a healthy reserve. As a matter of fact, the state made some legislative changes a couple of years ago that says you cannot have a fund balance that exceeds a certain portion of your ratio of revenue, so we had to spend down those funds, otherwise we had to start giving them back. Or providing discounts on building permit fees. So we felt it better to put it to use out there for equipment and services to provide better programs. Stormwater utilities, another one of our funds that is very tight. We're bringing in about $832,000 a year. We're spending $900,000 a year, so we're proposing a small deficit this year. I don't think we'll have that deficit. We had some savings on some projects, I believe, so that will maintain a positive fund balance. But that's a fund, and I think Mike might have indicated it in one of the presentations that we had last meeting regarding the water and sewer increases, that we may have to evaluate increasing our stormwater fees that we're charging right now. Because it's been, what, 16 years, Mike? 16 years since we last increased the stormwater rates that we charge for the customers. Water and sewer revenue, again, one of our, actually from an operational dollar standpoint, it's our biggest fund, bringing almost $12 million a year. We're spending $12 million a year, but we do have a hefty available fund balance of about $8 million that Rick is very eager to make sure that we upgrade the systems, and is doing a great job spending that down and improving the system. A lot of that money is actually going to go for some of the plant improvements that we're going to do and some other project expansions on services. So when we talk about, there's been some criticism of us doing our water and sewer impact fee waiver. We're able to do that because we have such strong reserves. So rather then keep building these reserves that we have in these funds based on these impact fees, we thought it best to draw down these reserves by making improvements in the water and sewer in order to try to generate additional ad valorem dollars in terms of taxes, making it an incentive program for people to annex and develop into the city to generate new ad valorem dollars, which we have little control. We have the most control over water and sewer revenues. We could basically change water and sewer revenues at will, as long as we can justify those expenditures. You have total control over the revenues and expenditures of the water and sewer fund. Budget summary, here's some expenditures that we're doing. These are some of the other proprietary funds. You notice the big one on there, police pension, $22 million. We've got $2 million in revenue. We're spending out $1 million in expenditures. That is in administrative costs and mostly pensions. And then we have reserves of $23 million. So all of these are trust funds that we really can't use for operational things. They're used for specific activities that we can do. But as you can see, they make up a sizable portion of our fund balances. As you can see at the bottom, $58 million in funds that we manage as part of the city of Eustis. Here's a summary of where some of those monies come from. You can see in the first column on the general fund, $8.7 million this year is coming in on ad valorem dollars. Utility taxes about $2.7 million, franchise fees $1.7, intergovernmental revenues of $1.7, and other financing sources of $1.8 make up our $18 million. So those are the majority of the funds. Obviously, you can see ad valorem makes the largest point. Other financing sources are those interfund transfers. About that 1.8 typically reflects the 1.8 million that we're transferring from the water and sewer fund into the general fund. So that's where that 1.8 comes from. And we've had discussions before about other communities. One other community has both a water and sewer and an electrical fund, and they actually transfer more in interfund transfers than they generate from ad valorem dollars into their general fund. So we've always taken a more conservative approach. We try to do a fair analysis of what that is. While it makes things tougher for us, I think taxpayers are still paying the money, writing us checks for goods and services. Doesn't matter where it comes from. So we try to do a fair analysis and evaluation of that. We'll be doing that again this year, and probably we'll be making an adjustment upward on that transfer from water and sewer based on the revenues coming in and the analysis of the interfund demands.
Ron, where do you put the CRA?
The CRA is not in the general fund.
Okay.
The CRA is one of the special revenue funds.
Okay.
So that would fall under that $2 million.
Okay,
So
got it.
all of those funds have been combined into some of those columns.
Gotcha. Okay.
So the enterprise funds are your water and sewer. Trust and agency funds, those are those pension funds and those other trust funds that we had. And the capital projects is the capital project funds that we have from the sales tax. So as you can see, we have $58 million in fund balances coming in, new revenues, $43 million in expenses. So all funds in the city, we are a $102 million operation in terms of cash assets that we have. So we're no small potatoes in terms of what we have to manage and operate in terms of the city. So what do we spend? The thing that everybody wants to know. Right now, this is on the general fund side. Last column shows our current fiscal year. So the cost of the massive salaries of the city commission and other things that we do shows us spending about $57,000 on city commission activities. So I can easily say that you folks aren't a drain on the resources of the city of Eustis. The city manager's office is about $1.2 million operation. Finance department, about $1.2 million. Legal, we've budgeted $110,000 this year. However, given some recent action we've had in the legal services, we've had to make a budget adjustment upward on that this year. Development Services Department, Lori's department is about $478,000. That includes all the planning, building and inspections department. Human Resources, $305,000 downstairs there. Police and Fire, Public Safety, $5.78 million on police, $3.1 million on fire. Congratulations, Chief Capri, you win.
We always win with police.
So,
Steal from us.
as you can see, any organization, municipal government organization, the lion's share of the expenses that any municipality pays for services are in your public safety. And in this case, you're looking at almost $9 million a year in terms of public safety expenses. For those that say we're not spending enough on public safety, I would like to show them this number in comparison with others. I can say this, in terms of a per capita cost that we pay for policing, we pay more for police services per capita than any other community in Lake County in terms of per capita cost per citizen. Public Works Department is $1.27 million in terms of public works. Library is $933,000. Park and Recreation, $1.1 million. And those are the operational costs, and we have some other fund transfers that go in and out of funds. Insurance, that's our liability insurance, isn't it, Mike?
Yes.
The $830,000. So our property and casualty insurance is about $830,000 a year. We're hoping for, what, about 10% increase?
Yeah, I'm hoping 10, maximum 15.
So those are some of the big things that we look for in terms of when we're doing the general fund budget. We try to look at what are the big things that are going to affect our general fund revenue. One is obviously the wage increases that we give to our employees. The other, obviously, is our pension increases. And based on a conversation with Mike today and the numbers we're anticipating from the actuaries and our pension funds, we don't see, while we haven't gotten a final fire number, but it shouldn't be close. We believe that the actual dollar cost this year should remain flat from the previous year, so we shouldn't have a big dollar increase. So while wages will go up, our percentage on the police side went down, but the net change is basically the same amount of dollars going into pensions this year as did last year, which is actually an improvement over previous years. So maintaining that is a good thing. We obviously would like to reduce that, and we'll be working toward doing that.
Does our insurance costs rise if our rating goes down with the fire department?
No, the ISO rating is what the people in the community are based on what they pay for their insurance. Obviously, our liability and coverage is based on the amount of training that they provide, the amount of services, the equipment that they have. The same with the police. Chief Capri is actually, have you had the de-escalation training? Monday. He's gotten with some connections of his over on the East Coast to do what's called de-escalation training. We've already notified our insurance company. Those types of trainings to reduce our liabilities and reduce our exposure goes a long way in reducing our insurance costs.
Exactly.
Any other questions?
Nope. That was
Okay.
it. You answered my question.
Street Improvement Fund, this year we're looking at about $1.7 million in total revenues and expenditures. So as I said earlier, that's a fund we run on basically a zero budget. We get in what we get and we spend exactly what we get in because we're trying to maximize the ability to improve as many streets as we can. So the administration on that, public lands, masons, street lighting comes out of that, so we pay electric for street lighting. So every street light that we have, we pay an electric bill for that, which costs us about $315,000 a year on our street line. Mowing is about a $300,000 a year operation for us, so keeping all of our city properties properly mowed is a $300,000 a year cost. Stormwater utility, $791,000, bringing in $822,000 is again You can see what we have. We have administration, bad debt that we get, contingencies, street and sweep drainage maintenance, stormwater projects, $800,000 this year in stormwater projects to improve stormwater circumstances in the city. Water and sewer fund, $10 million fund balance, revenue of 11.7, expenditures of 12.7, so we're spending a little bit more this year, but that's because we're doing capital projects. Typically, you like to have a balanced operating budget, but from time to time, you're not able to do that, particularly if you're going to do large capital projects from your reserves. So having a, quote, balanced budget is really getting into the weeds and looking at what you're doing. We have, every year since I've been here, we have had a balanced operating budget. From time to time, the overall fund balance, particularly last year, went down because of lost revenue and some capital projects that we did. But from an operations side, we have kept the fund balances from the operations standpoint as a balanced operating budget. So we're very happy to be able to do that. You can see where all the money comes in from the water sales. So we get general water sales. We actually separate out some of the larger developments not in the city. So the Sorrento Hills area brings in about $463,000 in water and sewer revenues. You can see where each of those costs come in and revenues come in for water and sewer services. So again, $11.7 million there. Again, water and sewer, where the costs go, administration, 1.4 from administration, customer service, and meter reading. Water administration, treatment costs, backflow, eastern plant systems, reclaim distribution, wastewater administration, management lift station, laboratory. We actually, for those of you who've never had, we actually have our own laboratory where we do our own water testing and we maintain the integrity of it. We have 2 degree chemists that are on staff. So when you're talking to kids in the community and working for the city, there are degree jobs within a municipality that kids can come back and home and work and be a chemist for the city of Eustis in our water and sewer department. So we have very high educated staff and very skilled staff doing these services.
Ron, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How do we get funds from backflow prevention?
Backflow prevention, Rick.
As far as backflow, every 2 years, the backflow preventers have to be certified. So we have a guy go through, we track them, make sure that everything gets certified. There is a submittal when they go through, to make sure that they set it in. I don't know exactly what it is per backflow, but there's companies that come out and do the testing, and then also we go through and make sure that everything is tracked.
So do we get a portion of what they charge?
I don't believe it comes in as a revenue for us.
Okay. These are the
We
costs.
don't perform the testing.
They do.
That's actually an expense, that's an expense.
Expense. Yeah.
That's $80,000 is what we
Yeah,
spend on backflow.
I was trying to figure out if we got any portion of the funds that they.
No.
That's a requirement by DEP, because if you
Yeah.
don't have the backflow, somebody could pollute our water
Water
system.
system, okay.
Again, we have transfers in and out of the fund. You can see here the line item, $1.8 million from the water and sewer into the general fund. $3 million transfers, so again, about a $12.7 million in expenses this year. Fire Prevention Fund, that's a specialized trust fund that they have. And I think we're done. The lights went on. Let me make sure I didn't. That was the last one. No, that's it.
That was the last one.
That was the last slide.
You want to look at anything particular on there?
Commissioners, any questions of Ron?
This is very good.
I have one question. Since, when we talked about transferring money from the CRA for part of Tom's fees and yours, I know that they have, JT is now working in the downtown CRA area. Can Chief pull from CRA
Yes, he could, since. a
for
specific-
JT's salary?
Correct, and we've never done that in the past because we've never had a specific officer dedicated for just the
And
CRA
I knew that. Can we
area.
do that now?
We can do that moving into the next fiscal year, yes, we could.
Okay. And also, Mike, when you and I had talked probably that last prior budget meeting about the fees that haven't gone up in 16 years? Why? That's a long time.
It's been a while.
I know.
I think the commercial one's $12.
Mhm.
Right?
It's
That
the-
is
it's-
probably the highest.
Yeah, but it's the lower one that was only like $4.
The residential.
The residential, yeah.
The residential,
Mhm.
and it's for every unit, so if there's an apartment building, each apartment gets that charge. Years ago, I wanted to do it under the CIP, and for whatever reason, it never got done. It just kind of went by the wayside.
Would you like me to be absolutely upfront and honest as to why?
Sure.
Political will.
Okay. I just wondered what, you know.
Yeah.
Because, they talk about things, if you did them incrementally in small increments, and then all of a sudden, your tax, you know what I'm saying? And so it's like, why didn't you do this just incrementally?
We haven't looked at it since I've been here, but my understanding in the past, it had been discussed by previous administrations
Okay.
to elected officials, and there was no desire to address it.
Okay. I just wondered.
But I believe still going forward, it'd be a good idea to do it incrementally and base it on a number that's predetermined by someone other than us, which would be the CIP, which is Consumer Price Index, or CPI, sorry. CIP.
No. Yeah, between.
Dan, anything else?
No, sir.
Willie, anything, sir?
Good.
Vice Mayor?
I'm good.
Okay.
Just moving forward, we will present at a future meeting the finalized CIP that has been submitted by the department heads to Mike. He presented it to me today. I will do my hacking at it, as we say, and present that to you at a future meeting. The department heads are submitting their final operating budgets this week. Next week, to Mike. Typically, before we present it, I go through them as the manager and make the appropriate adjustments. Obviously, department heads like to implement as much programs and services as they can, and my job is to balance those based on the availability of monies. So we will probably be doing that in June when we get the final numbers from the property appraiser in terms of how much funding that we will be getting in terms of the new increases. We'll be presenting a proposed millage rate. I know it's the desire of the commission to go through the budget in more detail than you have in the past in order to look at ways to possibly reduce that millage rate. We have kept the same millage rate now for the last 8 years. I know there's the desire to review that and maybe adjust that downward if possible. We'll have that information in June. I will have reviewed the proposed department head budgets, and then we can present those to you at that time with the millage information from the property appraiser and the proposed operating budgets from the staff.
Any public input for anything you've heard today? Not seeing any. We're going to close this meeting. We'll come back at 5:50 with an LPA meeting. Thank you, sir. I'll be back.